Excuse me, doctor, real quick, doctor. Hi, how you doing? Hi. Do you by any chance know where I can find the Clintex CTI research team? I've been looking for a while and I'm getting a little lost around here. You guys got so much white going on. You don't? Oh, okay. Well, I'm supposed to do a video. Do you mind if I just shoot one here real quick? I'll keep it down. Yeah, no worries. I'll let you guys get back to it. Thank you so much. All right. All right, guys, welcome back to another episode of Finance the Opinion, where I'm on a mission to find the craziest moonshots that the cryptoverse has to offer. Today's episode, we're gonna be talking about Clintex CTI, which is looking to bring blockchain technology over to the medical drug trial industry. Now, to be honest, I don't know a whole hell of a lot about the medical industry or pharmaceutical industry, but I am excited to see a project that is outside of the scope of the traditional crypto plays, which are financial industry or in metaverse gamified plays. I think we all kind of understand that the medical and the pharmaceutical industry worldwide, especially in the United States, is absolutely massive. And I'm sure there's a significant amount of potential to bring crypto technology, blockchain technology into that space. And this is something that exactly Clintex is looking to bring to the entire table. Now, again, being the fact that I don't know a whole hell of a lot about the medical industry, I'm interested to see what this project can do to entice me to either consider this a good investment or keep it into my portfolio as a watch list into the future, because that's really what it's all about. At the end of the day, in the stock market, doesn't 100% mean I know everything about all those industries, but I still have a few fundamentals to look at, and from there I can generally make a rudimentary decision on whether or not that might be a good enough investment. It's all about how they sell themselves, and I think that's something we should be thinking about with more projects we look into. So, safe to say today is going to be a little bit of a journey, a learning experience, and I hope you come along and learn a little bit something with me. At the end of the day, if we get lost, I'm sure we can probably ask our doctor friends over here. What do you think? Now, obviously, I am no expert in the pharmaceutical industry, medicine industry, that entire slice of the world, but I can recognize that there is a significant portion of money in that field. So even if there were to be a sliver of money taken from it for any project in the crypto space, being that they could bring anything to the table, then it might be worth time to look at it as a potential growth opportunity in another field outside of DeFi, outside of finance, outside of metaverse and gamify from the crypto space. So I'm kind of excited to take a look at a project that is outside of it. I will obviously take this and say, instead of the financial advice disclosure, I'm gonna say I am not a medical or pharmaceutical understander of much, but I can still point to understanding what it is that they may be trying to accomplish, and we can do a little bit of research to see if there is a need for what it is they're trying to accomplish. When it comes to actually fulfilling that I think needs a little bit of time, and I will say that this project is very early on. I'm hopeful for projects like this, and they do point to the fact that they say there's competition in the crypto space. I haven't come across them, but then there's thousands to pick to. If you know of any, leave those comments down below. I would love to know your opinion on this, and if you've seen any of these other pharmaceutical projects or any of these medicine plays, something outside of financial, something outside of metaverse. Let's start branching out and see what could be part of this mainstream adoption that the world is looking for when it comes to blockchain. All right, starting off my review of this, there's so much information regarding this, and I think as a retail investor looking at this from the perspective of getting in depth into it, that's something you're going to do if you really think that it is something that aligns with your investing goals. For me personally, I don't know enough of it, and I know that there's so much to be garnished out of something like this kind of project that I would need to go a little bit deeper, and unfortunately, it's very difficult for me to justify the significant portion of time to go into it without seeing at least a first glimpse into a client, like actually having it work. So right now this project is a very early phase and they're still in development. They haven't developed the product and they don't even have a client or any sort of testing to be done on it. Whether or not we're going to have enough space for this competition to slide in is going to be a key feature that I think we need to understand, because when I think of the pharmaceutical industry, I think of very heavy competition and I think of people messing around with IP, intellectual property, and not wanting to share. I don't see Johnson & Johnson wanting to share its IP with Moderna or, insert any other pharmaceutical name in here. But this is still worth a glance at, so we can put it on our watch list to really pay attention if if it comes to fruition and say, hey, we saw it. We'll take a look at the price action in a second to see if that is a valid answer. But the main things I wanted to point to on their landing page, and obviously most of the time this is filled with fluff, but this is the key, crux of what they're trying to solve. So if this aligns with you, then it might be important for you to take a little deeper look. Currently, efficiency issues in clinical trials are costing between $600,000 to $8 million per day, and are significantly delaying the delivery of new medicine to patients in need. This is what they want to change. Okay, so they've outlined the problem right here for you, is that clinical trials are taking too long. And this is something I would point to as being a little something that's been brought up recently. Obviously, we've all been affected by something that caused us to live in home a little bit more than often, and I can't speak about on YouTube. Now, when we're coming to talk about vaccines, we were put on a little bit of scope down on the microscope to see whether or not that could happen faster. This may be something perfect that a lot more people may be opening up to. Now, whether or not competition from pharmaceutical industries will want to participate with each other, I can't imagine that actually happening, but I do believe that some of this blockchain technology will be a part of it that will allow for that anonymous data to be shared. And if they get to the right people, maybe in some sort of government place or in some sort of centralized governing body that dictates a lot of these with people, this could be a play that would make sense. This little, we've got a bunch more fluff here. This is the perfect little synopsis of what it is that the building blocks of this project. So Clinical Trials Intelligence, CTI, which is part of the Clintex name, is a distributed technology platform that incorporates predictive data analytics, machine learning, and the innovative use of smart contracts to drive significant quality and operational improvements in clinical trials. Okay, so let's break this down and see if this makes sense. Predictive data analytics and machine learning are, I would imagine, hand in hand, but they're basically bringing along information that could speed up the process by catching it before they hit a roadblock, right? So it seems as though that may be what they're alluding to, is that data trials will allow them to go down a chain for so long without having the forethought that they may need to make tweaks before they get too far down there. They're going to use machine learning, AI. This is huge in a lot of other industries and is becoming more widely available. So I think leveraging this, if they actually indeed are leveraging it correctly, could be something of a huge importance. I do find it slightly hard to believe that this industry isn't already using it. Now, I think in some of the documentation, they do point to having a slightly old methodology about actually going through clinical trials, and that may be the case. You know, honestly, I could imagine there's plenty of industries out there, even the banking industry, hence why DeFi is doing so much information has become so big, is because the old banking industry is so lackadaisical and behind. They don't have to innovate because they got all the money in the world. I feel like the pharmaceutical company could be there too. So this predictive data analytics could be a big part of saving people money and time and getting those things to speed a lot faster. The second part of this is the innovative use of smart contracts to drive significant quality and operational improvements in clinical trials. So let's take out that fluff and just say smart contracts, which really at the end of the day are kind of like logic gates, where it's like, this thing has happened and all of a sudden now we can utilize our the next piece in the phase will automatically happen based on the smart contract. So I think they reference it a little bit later on, but a contractor fills in the information they need to, the smart contract automatically pays him and moves it to the next contractor, right, once it's been verified. So smart contracts are pretty much, as we know, going to be the future of a lot of Web3 and a lot of technology. And even though the technology exists, they're going to be a big part of it. So this is already pretty bullish information as far as what this project is offering to solve that one solution. But let's take a look at the team and see if they actually have what it takes. The review behind the team is actually pretty straightforward. When you actually click on all their LinkedIns, this is another one of those teams where it's like they actually have the credentials to back up the project that they're attempting to accomplish. Now, we've come across way too many in the altcoin space that just have teams that are so new to the space that we're just kind of like, it's a coin toss on whether they're going to accomplish it. Now, this team actually seems to have the repertoire, or again, the credentials that show that in each portion of their industry, as a COO, I can see this making sense, as the clinical data analytics, the clinical data services, these guys, especially at the top, all seem to be sitting in positions where they have actually got, again, some history in that field that will allow them to leverage either their network when it comes to getting in the right doors, or leverage the experience they've had in the industry, therefore giving them that ability to come up. Now, if this was just a bunch of programmers trying to make this, I'd be like, where, you know what I mean? You need that guy who's going to be the insider in that industry, right? So I think that this team has a good potential behind it. Obviously, they're doxed to what it is. Vetting it much further than looking at their LinkedIn history, unfortunately, isn't something my knowledge goes beyond. So as a retail investor, I can still look at it and go, okay, it looks like these group of people actually know what they are. So I do appreciate that they've got all the information out there and they all are doxed, at least the people we can see here. Too many projects these days are justifying not doxing, so it's a nice change of pace, so to speak. I also did miss this little portion of the website, which is if you want to, it's on their main page. If you want to check out the one-page summary, the Clintex white paper, and the clinical paper, the technical paper, this is the in-depth information on really detailed what they're going to go into. Go check that out. I'm not going to cover that in this video. I do want to look at the one-page summary because I think there's a couple of points that we can take a look at real quick. So they do point to one couple of metrics here that they point out is the marketing potential. They do see that the global drug development market is worth $350 billion per annum. I didn't know the exact number, but I have heard very similar, very large numbers, especially in the pharmaceutical industry. It's a very big business. There's a lot of money. So if they take a sliver of that, they're going to be doing pretty good as far as their ability to, as far as revenue and turnover and the potential market cap we may be looking at when it comes to a price prediction in the future. First to market, there is currently no competitor product where the analytics and data and machine learning are being used. So they're saying that they're pretty much the first one to bring those pieces, the AI part and the data analytics, the data analytics to actually ascertain those loopholes or places that you may want to skip over. I find, again, that hard to believe, but that's what they say here. Verifying that, we may have to point to a couple articles, which I have as tabs at the top here, and they do kind of even point to the 1%. If they can take an efficiency savings of 35 million from the entire industry, then there's going to be an incentive for people to basically give them that incentive, even if they took a fraction of it. So that's a portion that I thought we should show about the potential. They also have a nice little blurb here about the CTI token utility. Now, there is a fact section I'm going to go to that's a lot deeper into what it is they're offering, and is something I would thoroughly suggest reading if you want to go a little bit deeper into each portion of the section of like what everything is going to be. But this is a quick overview of what the Clintex or the CTI token will actually, or how it will be used. It's going to be used in a licensing utility model. So they're basically going to be asking clients to hold on to them for a year. So it's a yearly license model. They will have to be purchased and staked in the platform's integrated wallet for the period of the license. They claim that this will cause a deflationary reaction to the entire supply model. Again, it's not technically deflationary if it can come back out at a moment's notice. So say that year's up and the company decides they don't want to use it anymore, it will come back onto the market, therefore having those bumps. So I would be a little concerned about the potential for those giant ebbs and flows, because I'm not sure what the amount of tokens would be needed. So it would be interesting to see what that supply mechanism or that removal mechanism will have effect-wise yearly as it comes on. Now, if it were to actually start being picked up, it kind of could be considered as an actual deflationary model, because they would be starting absorbed, and if it really did take off, they would be holding on to them not indefinitely, but potentially for a very long period of time, which could really increase the price significantly of that CTI token, which does point to, we should take a look at the tokenomics as far as how many there are, and there aren't that many, which is kind of interesting. I figured we should look at the charts while we're talking about that, sort of the supply out there. Currently, the price is very low. We're at a 1%, and I say very low, and again, anyone who knows anything about market cap knows that doesn't mean a lot, but what this does mean is that there's a lot of people in this who FOMO in because they think it's a cheap price and can potentially get up to $10 because they don't understand market cap. That said, it's got a very small amount of supply. So our max supply listed over here is about a little under 200 million, which is very short, and they do say their circulating supply is significantly less than that. We can take a look at the on-chain analytics here in a second, but I will point to the fully diluted market cap here of 2 million. It's really kind of low, and a concern I have about this is I'm not sure how much they've already pulled out or liquidated to fund their daily operations as far as from their IDO or however it was actually pointed out, but this is not a lot of money to make it through a couple-year bear market potentially. Like, I don't know how much it would cost, but I would imagine development of a platform such as this would require a significant amount of capital to keep it going. Now, whether or not they have reserves that they've already pulled out, maybe at some all-time highs, if we look down at the charts, maybe there was a bit of sell pressure from the team itself that allowed them to stack up some reserves to put through this entire project. That could be an interesting consideration. But yeah, that's a really low amount of leftover money, and remembering that this includes all of the tokens that are out there. So this includes some of the ones that are actually being held up by other people and things out there, so and holders. So it's really not a lot leaving left on the table. Again, not sure how much they have left over from reserves, so I would take it with a little bit of a grain of salt. Something I really briefly did want to point out was that the current markets that it shows on CoinMarketCap, and I believe there's going to be some DEXs available, is KuCoin and Gate.io. As of making this video, Gate.io has recently shut down its availability to US customers. So, and there's rumors that KuCoin may be next. So these things may be an interesting point, because now you just have the amount of places that you can get this token. So this could be a little bit more scarce, a little bit harder to get your hands on. I'm sure they'll work out a way around it. But yeah, that's not necessarily a great thing as far as availability and access to those tokens. We do want a little bit of trade action to happen in order for this to have a really big future. While I was here, I didn't really point to it, but looking at the all-time on the charts on what we've done, and something I've mentioned before, and so many people react to me saying, you can't look at charts for altcoins. And I say to them, well, I'm not looking at it for necessarily like a price prediction based on like previous movement, especially on such short time frames. But what I am looking for is the consumer sentiment, what people actually do with it during periods that we know have movements. So when we take a look at a period here at the end of 2021, which we can see the date down here, let me zoom in a little bit for you guys. This was a bull run. This is where we had a massive peak, and we can see that there was a sell-off pressure here and a huge pike up here, which has to do with some sort of distribution or whatever actually happened here. Maybe it was part of the vesting schedule, and I'll take a look at the tokenomics here. But this is where the bull run actually happened, and we don't have a lot of retail investment getting into this, because if we did, this would have been where the real spike was, because a lot of people would have FOMO'd in. So I'm not sure if it has to do with the industry's too far understanding of knowledge for people, or whether or not they just weren't far enough along for that project. But we did see some projects that were coming out right here at the end of the year in 2021, and were having absolutely massive spikes in their price action based on nothing. They had nothing as far as utility, they had nothing as far as built, it was just a concept, and it went absolutely bonkers because people just FOMO'd into it. So something to think about when it comes to the price action of something like this. It might have a hard time picking up steam considering so many people in the crypto space they're more used to the things they know. They know finance right now, and they're spending a lot of time with GameFi and metaverse plays. So something to be thought about. So this is the meat and potatoes of really where you're going to find all the information, and they do cover a number of decent topics here, and they ask the question and they give an answer by just clicking on this. You can actually check it out. So I want to point to a couple of these again so we can just wrap our heads back around what they're actually pulling out. Beautiful question here. Why does clinical trials intelligence need a blockchain? So this could be answering why would we need blockchain to be brought to clinical trials industry at all. Audit trails are required procedure and control for all clinical data. So they're saying basically clinical trials need that chain of what happened. And that would make a lot of sense. So they're pointing to a couple of regulatory authorities that need all those records, all those changes, and whoever's made those changes to be known. All that data needs to be known. That sounds exactly like, as they say, a blockchain ledger is perfect record-keeping tool to basically be in compliance, and so that everyone's aware of what has happened. They do point out to the further immutable nature of blockchain. Having secure completely record history of all the data on the blockchain allows for creation and evolution of decentralized clinical database. Now I think this is an interesting point to make, because I talked about brands probably not wanting to share their IP with each other, and if there was some sort of central repository, it probably would speed up the process for all clinical trials. The problem I think a lot of people will end up getting into is that they won't want to share their IP and let them know too much about who it is or where it's coming from. But if this data could be done anonymously, this may be a very interesting piece to the entire problem here. This paragraph does continue to kind of talk about how the predictive analytics or the powerful machine learning algorithm will be increased by the potential of having decentralized sort of library of information. Whether or not that will actually come through to fruition, I can't say, because again, it would be interesting to see how competition will want to feed into this industry, or whether or not even the clients using it will want their data ever stored long-term on there. I would imagine it being a very competitive industry. They do point to the smart contract being a very large payment, and I kind of touched on this a second ago, but it would be smart payments based on triggers and milestones in the clinical data process. So basically a automatic trigger set is a milestone reached when a third party would be verified, later verified, they would automatically be paid, and it would move on to the next sort of third party. A very interesting point here they do point to is that the current oracle they use, so they would be using oracles for this input of data, and if we don't know what an oracle is, go do research on Chainlink, but they do point to Chainlink being the oracle of choice for this platform. So I think Chainlink is one of those pocket holes that a lot of people have been sleeping on, or have been frustrated that the price action hasn't done what it wants to. I think if you see any large project out there, you will realize that Chainlink is the go-to service for oracles. There are a number of other oracles out there, but Chainlink is the only name that really ever comes up in any reputable brand. So that's an interesting case for it. for Chainlink, not so much for Clintex, but for Chainlink. So something to think about. I thought that was very interesting. I also wanted to point to, do they have any competition in the space? So this is kind of what we've been trying to ascertain through all of this sort of like looking into this project so far. And they do point that there are centralized vendors like Tibco, okay, which I can point to their website in a second here. They do say that that product or what they offer does not offer predictive analytics and machine learning. So they're hoping that that's what's going to differentiate them from that client. If we do take a look at Tibco actually offers a very wide range of services to a significantly larger amount of industries. And I'm going to try and zoom in here for you. Manufacturing, banking, insurance, retail, telecom. So here's a company that's probably well ingrained with what they do and their clients and their offering and their services. So they've got a large, obviously a lot of these industries have a big amount of built up already exposure that that new crypto space projects are going to need to fight against. So it should be interesting to see what they can do to take a dent out of what they offer, and really if they are offering something new. But if we do take a look at the healthcare industry, it does again point to they're just looking to say, hey, we do offer the services, we look at for the insight, we make it available. It's what they're looking to offer. So whether or not you think that they have what it takes to actually dethrone them or take a bunch of their market share is going to be something that I would almost point to we need a little bit of time on. I did want to point to, while we're kind of looking at other information out there, is just some more backing articles. Some of these articles they did print out inside of they are independent companies, but they were available on their Twitter and through some other articles basically following down the chain. You can come to a few interesting articles about it, and this I would point to is improving clinical trial collaboration with blockchain. So this one goes to talk about it a little bit, and it does talk about how much it actually costs. They do point to 2.9 billion, then they say the average is closer to 1.3 billion. Is the median price for cost to bring a drug to market. So that's a very large amount of money to bring a drug to market. And again, if you can take a sliver of that, that could be a decent market share there. I would imagine that there are slivers being taken by companies like Tibco and competitors out there. So, again, we have to see what they can actually bring it out all the way through. I wanted to also point to this article here, which was one they had on there, that fact there where they pointed it to third-party information. It had a couple of good little sentences here that I thought would be of benefit to people in understanding this entire space. At present, there is no central repository of information when it comes to Alzheimer's disease, despite hundreds of projects in the space at any one time, okay? If we only had a secure network to share data, we could have in a significantly wider data pool to draw from, enriching data development, drug development programs, and ultimately providing a better and faster solution to unmet medical needs, such as safe and effective Alzheimer's treatments. So here's industry insider kind of talking about how a specific solution or disease that needs an answer similar to this, that central repository that we kind of talked about a second ago. So I think the central repository aspect of it would be interesting. I just don't know how many people would get on board. I think the anonymity would have to be obviously a really big part that they would have to be sold on from the blockchain. But again, some of those bigger companies, Pfizer, some of those real big ones that we hear some good and bad things about, are not necessarily going to want to play too much into this entire space. So something to take with a grain of salt. Here is a really decent section going through a larger portion of their licensing model. So inside this fact, they have the whole CLI token section that actually wants to talk about what are they used for and how will you be able to continue the demand for it. This is again talking deeper into the licensing model that they're looking to believe and how they think that this will eventually be a big portion to increasing the demand. Something here I did want to point to that isn't mentioned in that previous section we talked about is the token burn that they're actually going to have. In the event that a pharmaceutical client chooses not to renew their clinical trial intelligence access, the CTI tokens that were staked for that license will be returned to Clintex, therefore probably putting them back into the cycle. As part of our commitment to continually reduce the CTI supply pool, 20% of those tokens will be destroyed permanently. So this is an interesting information piece that would basically be the actual deflationary model that we talked about. So technically, every time they do license out to someone, there will be a deflationary piece to it. So that is something that should have probably been mentioned on there in their earlier white paper point, and something that I think is interesting to note. So that 20% deflationary portion could be a very interesting part to raise this price up. They're going to need clients first. Something we need to mention. They're going to need clients first. I'm gonna cut this over to this screen because I think this is a perfect time to kind of take this a little bit of a pause. I continued making the video a little bit longer, going down the on-chain analysis and looking deeper into the project. And honestly, I think at this point, we can kind of come up with a little bit of a synopsis for everybody because I think it's still very early into this project. I do like seeing different kind of plays and projects playing into a space outside of, again, the financial and metaverse and gamified markets that we are traditionally seeing out there. Whether or not this is one you get into right now, I think is probably something of a sit back for the period for me, just because I'm waiting for a little bit more to come from them into the market and see if that blockchain technology actually provides an answer that they're looking for. Now, I know that what Clintex is looking to offer is also that predictive AI learning to the entire process, but again, I find that hard to believe that there isn't something of that nature that's already out there. And if there isn't, then this really could be a very large play. It is a little concerning, again, talking about the charts and looking that there wasn't a lot of retail investors that were really interested in this project. But again, I could really point that to being just because it's in the medical industry and people, like us in the crypto space probably don't know enough about it to really get too heavy into it, which could lead to it being the perfect play for you. But again, if we look at all the information related around the GUI development and where they actually are in the phasing process, I think it would be really nice to actually see a client in the pipeline and see that licensing model go through and actually see how some trials go, because at the end of the day, it's really going to be whether or not the product actually works and whether or not we can actually get people on board and sell them that product. I think a big portion of this is going to be able to get into the doors, into the right rooms, which will come to the network of that team, which I did point to as being something that looks like they potentially do have those doors to be able to open. But again, it's going to come down to, does the product even work? I'm a little bit wary more and more these days of looking into projects that honestly aren't finished before we get too far into the investment strategy. I know we want to get these moonshots before they take off, but writing a bunch of what ifs and potentials down on a piece of an article don't really help a lot. And even though you're building it in the process, there's a number of things that can completely crash a project before it gets to fruition. We've seen in the crypto space, it's just filled with them, it's ubiquitous. So be careful out there, but at the same time, maybe put this on your watch list as something to keep an eye on to diversify your portfolio into another industry. It's very nice to be it would be very nice to get into another industry, again, outside of financial and market and metaverse in the crypto space. So it is one that I'm gonna be keeping an eye on, but I'm probably not gonna be putting it in my bag right now. I'll probably pick this up in a year to maybe see where the development is and see if they have a client. This is the part of the video, guys, where if you found any value or you appreciated the content in any way, shape, or form, you go ahead, drop a like, drop a subscribe. Any of those pieces really do help the channel out. But if you don't want to, leaving comments down below and tell me what I did wrong would also be awesome, fantastic information for me and place for me to learn and get a little bit of feedback. But if you think I did something right, definitely those comments down below because I could use the little pat on the back for this one. Hope you got some value out of this, but this is the place where I give you my usual disclaimer of this not being anything to do with financial advice. It's just an opinion. And I'll catch you guys in the next video.